Zara kept her sleeves rolled down, even in the sweltering heat of the Academy's climate simulation chambers. Her classmates from dozens of different worlds had long since adapted to the rotating environmental conditions that mimicked various planetary atmospheres, but she always remained covered. The other students whispered about the quiet human, girl who never participated in swimming exercises and always found excuses to avoid the medical bay. The Galactic Academy of Sciences floated in the neutral zone between three major star systems, accepting only the brightest minds from across known space. Zara had arrived 6 months ago with stellar test scores and a recommendation from Earth's Colonial Education Board, but no personal history beyond her name and academic achievements. When pressed by counselors about her family or background, she would simply say she had no past worth discussing. Her roommate, Keth, a crystalline being from the Andorian clusters, had tried multiple times to engage her in personal conversation. The translucent creature's natural empathy made it particularly sensitive to emotional distress, and Zara radiated waves of hidden pain that Keth could feel through the walls of their shared dormitory. "You know, human Zara," Keth said one evening as they studied quantum mechanics, his voice creating harmonic resonances in the air. "My people believe that sharing burdens makes them lighter. Perhaps you would find comfort in speaking of your origins." Zara looked up from her holographic equations, her dark eyes reflecting the blue glow of the data streams. "Some things are better left buried, Keth. My past doesn't define my future." But Keth noticed how she unconsciously rubbed her left forearm when she said this, a nervous habit that had become more pronounced over the weeks. There was definitely something hidden beneath those long sleeves. The next day brought combat training, a mandatory course designed to prepare Academy students for the harsh realities of space exploration. Instructor Vex, a battle-scarred Drakmarian with 4 arms and an intimidating reputation, had little patience for students who couldn't adapt to physical challenges. "Today we practice zero-gravity rescue scenarios," Vex announced, his reptilian features set in their usual scowl. "You will work in pairs. Environmental suits are required." Zara's face went pale. The environmental suits were form-fitting and would leave her arms exposed beneath the transparent material. She approached Vex after the other students had begun pairing off. "Instructor Vex, I have a medical condition that prevents me from participating in suit-based exercises," she said quietly. Vex's yellow eyes narrowed. "Medical conditions are documented in student files. I see no such notation for you, human. Perhaps you would prefer to explain this condition to the Academy medical staff." The threat hung in the air. Zara knew that a medical examination would expose everything she had worked so hard to hide. She nodded reluctantly and joined her assigned partner, a young Zentaurian named Jix, whose purple skin shimmered with nervous energy. As she began putting on the environmental suit, Zara moved carefully, hoping to keep her arms positioned away from the other students. But Jix, eager to help his obviously distressed partner, reached out to assist with the suit's arm components. "Here, let me help you with those connections," Jix said, gently grasping her left arm to guide it into the suit sleeve. The moment his fingers made contact with her skin, something extraordinary happened. Jix's species possessed a unique trait called psychometric touch, the ability to read the history of objects and beings through physical contact. As his fingertips traced across her forearm, his eyes widened in shock and he stumbled backward. "By the 7 moons," he whispered, his voice trembling. "What did they do to you?" Other students began to notice the commotion. Zara quickly pulled her arm away and tried to continue with the suit preparation, but Jix stood frozen, his normally cheerful demeanor replaced by horror and disbelief. Keth drifted over, his crystalline form catching the light as he moved. "Jix, what troubles you? I saw..." Jix struggled to find words. The markings on her skin. "They're not tattoos or decorations. They're coordinates. Battle coordinates and death counts." The training bay fell silent as more students gathered around. Zara's hands shook as she tried to seal her suit, but it was too late. The secret she had guarded so carefully was beginning to unravel. Instructor Vex approached, his military bearing evident in every step. "Explain," he commanded. Jix looked at Zara with a mixture of sympathy and awe. "Sir, I can read object histories through touch. When I made contact with her arm, I saw images, battles, terrible battles, and her skin. It's covered in what appear to be military designations, casualty figures, and stellar coordinates from dozens of engagements." "That's impossible," said Nira. a Voltarian student whose species prided itself on their knowledge of military history. Humans are newcomers to galactic warfare. They've only been space-capable for a few centuries. Their military involvement has been minimal at best. But Vex was studying Zara with new interest. As a veteran of multiple conflicts, he recognized the signs of battle trauma when he saw them. The way she held herself, the constant vigilance in her eyes, the careful way she moved, these weren't the characteristics of a typical academy student. "Remove the suit," Vex ordered. "Sir, I can't," Zara began. "That was not a request, student. Remove the suit now or I will have security do it for you." Zara's resolve crumbled. She had come so far, worked so hard to build a new life, but there was no escape now. With trembling hands, she began to remove the environmental suit, revealing her arms for the first time since arriving at the academy. The assembled students gasped collectively. Zara's arms were covered from wrist to shoulder with intricate markings etched directly into her skin. They weren't tattoos, they appeared to be burned or branded, creating a permanent record of information that covered every inch of visible flesh. Coordinates, dates, casualty numbers, unit designations, and tactical data were inscribed in precise rows, creating a living database of military information. But most shocking of all were the symbols that Vex recognized immediately. Commendations for valor, strategic victories, and kill counts that would be impressive for an entire military unit, let alone one individual. "My gods," whispered Keth, his crystalline form dimming with emotion. "Zara, what are you?" Zara stood in the center of the group, her secret finally exposed, her arms bare for all to see. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I told you I had no past. That was a lie. I have too much past, more than any one person should carry." She looked around at the shocked faces of her classmates, beings from dozens of worlds who had never seen anything like the living record of warfare that covered her skin. "My name is Zara Chen, former commander of the Terran Deep Strike Force. These marks represent every battle I've fought, every life lost under my command, and every victory bought with blood. I came here to forget, but apparently some things can never be left behind." The silence in the training bay stretched on for what felt like hours. Zara stood with her arms exposed, the intricate markings visible under the bright academy lights. Each symbol told a story of violence and sacrifice that none of her classmates could have imagined. Instructor Vex was the first to break the silence. His forearms crossed as he studied the markings with the eye of a military professional. "Commander Chen," he said, using her former rank with unmistakable respect, "I recognize some of these engagement codes. The Siege of Proxima Station, the Battle of the Crimson Nebula, the Defense of New Geneva. You know about those battles?" asked Nira, her scaled features showing confusion. "But those conflicts aren't in any of our military databases. The Academy's records show minimal human involvement in galactic warfare." Vex's expression darkened. "That's because those records have been classified at the highest levels. The battles Commander Chen participated in were part of a shadow war that most of the galaxy never knew existed." Jix was still staring at Zara's arms, his psychometric abilities allowing him to see deeper than the surface markings. "There's more," he said quietly. "The images I saw when I touched her, they weren't just human battles. I saw other species fighting alongside humans. Drakmarians, Voltarians, even some Centaurians. But they were fighting against something else. Something that made them all work together." Zara finally found her voice. "You want to know the truth? Fine. But you won't find it in any Academy database because the Galactic Council decided the truth was too dangerous for public knowledge." She walked over to a bench and sat down heavily, as if the weight of her secrets had been physically pressing down on her. 15 years ago, long-range scouts detected something approaching from the void between galaxies. At first, we thought it was just another asteroid cluster or space debris. But as it got closer, we realized it was artificial, a fleet of ships unlike anything we'd ever seen. Keth moved closer, his crystalline form flickering with nervous energy. "What kind of ships?" "The kind that don't negotiate," Zara replied grimly. "They called themselves the Harvesters. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything the known species possessed. They didn't want our resources or our territory. They wanted to consume everything living in the galaxy and convert it into energy for their journey to the next galaxy." The students exchanged worried glances. This wasn't the kind of information typically shared in Academy courses. "The first contact went exactly as you'd expect," Zara continued. "Diplomatic ships were destroyed on site. Colony worlds went silent one by one. Within 6 months, they had consumed 3 entire star systems. leaving nothing but empty space behind. Vex nodded grimly. The Galactic Council's official response was to form a defensive perimeter and attempt negotiations, which failed spectacularly, Zara said with bitter laughter. The Harvesters didn't see us as intelligent life forms worth preserving. To them, we were just organic matter to be processed. So while the Council debated and formed committees, people were dying by the billions. She stood up and began rolling up her sleeves even further, revealing markings that extended up to her shoulders. That's when Earth's Colonial Defense Force made an unofficial decision. If the established galactic powers weren't willing to fight, then humanity would fight alone if necessary. But humans were still relatively new to galactic society, protested Nira. Your military technology was primitive compared to the major powers. Technology, yes, Zara agreed. But warfare? Humans have been perfecting the art of killing for thousands of years. While other species were building peaceful civilizations, humans were learning every possible way to destroy their enemies. Jix shuddered as more images flashed through his psychometric perception. I can see it now. The strategies you used, they were brutal. Effective, but brutal. We introduced concepts to galactic warfare that no one had ever considered before, Zara explained. Suicide runs, kamikaze attacks, scorched earth tactics. We taught the galaxy what total war actually meant. She pointed to a series of marks near her elbow. This represents the Battle of Kendra 7. The Harvesters had taken the planet and were processing the population. Standard military doctrine would have been to write off the planet and establish defensive positions elsewhere. Instead, we loaded freighter ships with antimatter charges and flew them directly into the Harvester motherships. You destroyed your own ships? Asked Keth, horrified. We destroyed everything, Zara said simply. The Harvester fleet, the planet, and yes, our own ships. But we saved 15 billion people on the neighboring worlds by stopping the Harvesters from advancing. Instructor Vex was studying the markings with growing amazement. These casualty figures, if they're accurate, you were personally responsible for eliminating over 300 Harvester vessels. I was responsible for a lot more than that, Zara replied quietly. The marks on my arms represent confirmed enemy kills, but they also represent every human soldier who died following my orders. Every pilot who flew suicide missions because I commanded it. Every crew member who stayed behind to ensure the mission succeeded. The weight of her words settled over the group like a heavy blanket. These young students, many of whom had never seen real violence, were struggling to comprehend the scope of what Zara had experienced. How did it end? Asked Nira softly. Earth's military strategist came up with something called the Prometheus Protocol, Zara explained. We realized that the Harvesters' main advantage was their technology, but they had one critical weakness. They were machine intelligences that relied on predictable patterns and logical decision-making. She touched a particularly intricate set of markings near her shoulder. So we introduced chaos into every engagement. Random tactics, irrational strategies. We made decisions that no sane commander would make, and it confused their tactical computers long enough for us to get inside their defenses. And the other species? Asked Jix. I saw them fighting alongside humans in the visions. Once the established powers saw that human tactics were actually working, they started adopting our methods. Drakmarians learned about berserker charges. Voltarians mastered hit-and-run guerrilla warfare. Even the peaceful Zentaurians started using psychological warfare techniques. Vex's respect for the young woman was evident in his voice. You taught the galaxy how to win an unwinnable war. We taught the galaxy how to become monsters in order to defeat monsters, Zara corrected. The war ended when we finally pushed the Harvesters back beyond the galactic rim, but the cost was enormous. Entire species had to abandon their peaceful philosophies. Billions died. Hundreds of worlds were left uninhabitable. She began rolling her sleeves back down, hiding the markings once again. When it was over, the Galactic Council decided that the truth about the war was too traumatic for public knowledge. They classified everything and created sanitized records that made it seem like a minor border conflict. The surviving veterans were given new identities and scattered across the galaxy. So you came here to start over, Keth said with understanding. I came here because I wanted to be a student instead of a soldier, Zara replied. I wanted to learn about the universe instead of destroying it. But apparently the past has a way of catching up with you. The training bay fell silent again as the implications of her story sank in. These markings weren't just records of battle. They were a living testament to the darkest period in galactic history, carried by someone who had been at the center of it all. Word of Zara's revelation spread through the academy faster than a quantum transmission. Within hours, students from every corner of the galaxy were whispering about the human girl whose skin told the story of a secret war. Some approached her with curiosity, others with fear, and a few with something approaching reverence. Zara had hoped that revealing her past would somehow make things easier, but instead she found herself more isolated than ever. She sat alone in the academy's observation deck, watching distant stars through the massive, transparent aluminum windows. The peaceful view seemed to mock the violence etched into her flesh. "Commander Chen?" Zara turned to see a tall, elegant figure approaching. It was Dr. Lyrian Starweaver, the Academy's Dean of Historical Studies and one of the most respected academics in the galaxy. Her silvery hair and luminous blue skin marked her as one of the ancient ethereal race, beings who had achieved near immortality through their mastery of energy manipulation. "It's just Zara now," she replied wearily. "The war is over. My commission ended years ago." Dr. Starweaver sat beside her, her movements graceful despite her obvious age. "Perhaps the commission ended, but the experiences that shaped you remain. I've been reviewing classified council archives since yesterday's incident." "Let me guess," Zara said bitterly. "You're here to tell me that my presence at the academy is disruptive and that I should leave quietly." "On the contrary," Dr. Starweaver replied with a slight smile. "I'm here to tell you that you may be exactly what the academy needs." Zara looked at her in surprise. "What do you mean?" "The Galactic Council's decision to classify the Harvester War was politically expedient, but educationally disastrous," the Dean explained. "We're training the next generation of explorers, scientists, and leaders, but we're sending them into a universe where they know nothing about the greatest threat our civilization has ever faced." She gestured toward the stars visible through the window. "The Harvesters were pushed back, not destroyed. Intelligence reports suggest they're regrouping somewhere beyond the galactic rim. Meanwhile, our students learn sanitized history that teaches them the galaxy is essentially a peaceful place where conflicts can be resolved through diplomacy. The council thought that knowledge of the war would create panic," Zara said. "Instead, it's created dangerous naivety." Dr. Starweaver replied. "Your classmates are brilliant minds, but they have no understanding of what real conflict looks like. They study theoretical combat scenarios that bear no resemblance to actual warfare." As if summoned by their conversation, a group of students entered the observation deck. Jix led the way, followed by Keth, Nira, and several others Zara recognized from various classes. They approached hesitantly, clearly having rehearsed what they wanted to say. "Zara," Jix began, his purple skin shimmering with nervous energy. "We've been talking, and we want to learn more about what really happened during the war. The historical databases don't contain any useful information," added Nira. "Just vague references to border conflicts and minor territorial disputes." Keth's crystalline form flickered as he spoke. "We realize that you're a living piece of history. Your experiences could teach us things no textbook ever could." Dr. Starweaver watched the exchange with interest. "What are you proposing?" "An independent study group," said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Cadet Thorn approaching. He was a Drakmarian like Instructor Vex, but younger and less scarred. "I've spoken with students from all the major species represented at the academy. Everyone wants to understand what really happened." Zara shook her head. "You don't understand what you're asking. The war wasn't glorious or heroic. It was nightmare fuel that left everyone involved permanently damaged, which is exactly why we need to understand it." Thorn replied firmly. "If the Harvesters return, we'll be the ones called upon to fight them. How can we defend the galaxy if we don't understand what we're fighting against? Or how to fight them," added Jix. "The psychometric images I saw showed tactics and strategies unlike anything taught in our military science courses." Dr. Starweaver stood up, her decision apparently made. "I'm formally approving an advanced seminar in applied conflict studies to be taught by our resident expert on the subject." She looked at Zara meaningfully. Of course, participation would be entirely voluntary. Zara felt trapped between her desire to forget the past and her growing realization that these students might actually need to know the truth. "I'm not a teacher. I'm barely even a student myself." "You're a survivor," said Keth simply. "And sometimes that's the most important qualification of all." Over the following days, word of the proposed seminar spread throughout the academy. To Zara's surprise, students from dozens of different species requested permission to join. Some were motivated by curiosity, others by a growing awareness that their education had significant gaps. But not everyone approved of the idea. A group of senior students, led by a pompous Altarian named Counselor Vane, organized a formal protest. "It's inappropriate and potentially traumatic to expose students to classified military information," Vane declared during a public forum. The Galactic Council classified these records for good reason. "Some knowledge is too dangerous to share." "What's dangerous is ignorance," replied Thorne. "My people have military traditions dating back thousands of years, but even we were unprepared for the Harvester threat." The old ways of thinking about conflict weren't enough. The debate raged for days, with faculty members split on the issue. Some supported Dr. Starweaver's position that students needed comprehensive education about galactic history. Others worried about the psychological impact of exposing young minds to the realities of total war. The controversy came to a head when Instructor Vex made an unexpected announcement during a routine combat training session. "I will be co-teaching the Applied Conflict Studies seminar," he declared, to a room full of shocked students. "Like Commander Chen, I am a veteran of the classified conflicts. My species learned valuable lessons about warfare from human tactical innovations." Vane stood up angrily. "This is completely inappropriate. Veterans have no business traumatizing students with war stories." Vex's forearms crossed in a gesture that any Drakmarian would recognize as barely controlled aggression. "Student Vane, your species achieved galactic prominence because you avoided all military conflicts for the past millennium. That policy served you well during peacetime, but it left you completely helpless when real threats emerged." The instructor walked over to a holographic display and activated a tactical simulation. "Tell me, what would your response be to an enemy fleet that cannot be negotiated with and considers all organic life to be consumable resources?" Vane stammered for a moment before replying. We would attempt to establish communication protocols and find a diplomatic solution. And while you were composing your diplomatic overtures, they would be systematically harvesting every living being in your star system." Vex replied coldly. "This is exactly the kind of thinking that nearly led to galactic extinction." The tension in the room was palpable as students realized they were witnessing a fundamental disagreement about how to prepare for an uncertain future. Zara found herself speaking before she realized it. "The choice isn't between peace and war. The choice is between being prepared for war and being victims of war. The Harvesters didn't give us the luxury of choosing peace." She looked around the room at the faces of her classmates, young, brilliant minds from dozens of different worlds, all trying to understand their place in a galaxy that suddenly seemed more dangerous than they had imagined. "I didn't want to teach this seminar," she continued. "I came here to forget about war, not relive it. But maybe forgetting is a luxury we can't afford." The first session of Applied Conflict Studies took place in one of the Academy's smaller lecture halls. But even so, it was packed beyond capacity. Students sat on the floor, stood along the walls, and some even participated via holographic link from other parts of the station. Word had spread throughout the Academy, and curiosity about the classified war had reached fever pitch. Zara stood at the front of the room, feeling completely out of place. She had commanded fleets and made life-or-death decisions for entire star systems, but facing a room full of eager students terrified her in a way that enemy fire never had. "I don't know how to be a teacher," she began honestly. "I only know how to be a soldier. So instead of lectures, I'm going to show you what war actually looks like." She activated the room's holographic projector, and suddenly the space was filled with a three-dimensional star map, showing the Andromeda sector. Dozens of red indicators marked the locations of Harvester incursions. "This was the situation 3 months into the conflict," Zara explained. "The Harvesters had consumed 12 star systems and were advancing on 3 more. Traditional military doctrine called for establishing a defensive perimeter here." She highlighted a line of star systems. "The idea was to evacuate civilians and make a stand at the most defensible positions." Keth raised his crystalline hand. "That seems like a logical strategy. Preserve resources and choose favorable ground for engagement." It was logical, Zara agreed. It was also exactly what the Harvesters expected. Their tactical computers had analyzed thousands of battles from galactic history. They could predict conventional military responses with 97% accuracy. She changed the display to show actual battle footage, recorded from the cockpit of a human fighter. The students watched in horrified fascination as massive Harvester ships, each the size of a small moon, methodically dismantled a space station while Defensive fleets fired uselessly at energy, shields that absorbed every shot. Traditional tactics failed, because the harvesters weren't just technologically superior, Zara continued. They were emotionally superior. They felt no fear, no anger, no desperation. They couldn't be intimidated or confused. They simply calculated the most efficient way to achieve their objectives and executed those plans perfectly. Nira leaned forward in her seat. So how did you defeat them? We didn't defeat them with superior firepower or brilliant strategy, Zara replied. We defeated them by becoming something they couldn't calculate. Something completely irrational. She touched the markings on her arm, visible now that she had begun wearing short sleeves to class. The first successful engagement happened at Proxima Station. The harvesters had surrounded the facility and were systematically breaking through the defenses. Standard protocol would have been to evacuate and retreat. The holographic display showed a detailed recreation of the battle. Harvester ships formed perfect geometric patterns around the station, their energy weapons methodically stripping away defensive systems. Instead, the station commander made a decision that no sane military officer would make, Zara continued. He ordered all remaining personnel to the reactor core and initiated a controlled overload. Then he transmitted an open message to the harvester fleet. She activated an audio recording. The voice that emerged was calm, almost conversational. Harvester vessels, this is Station Commander Rodriguez. You have 60 seconds to withdraw beyond the system's edge, or I will detonate this station's fusion reactors and take your entire fleet with me. The students listened in stunned silence as the recording continued.
I have 3,000 civilians on this station, including my wife and children.
I'm willing to kill them all to stop you. That's what humans do when we're cornered. We become monsters. Jix was staring at the display with his psychometric abilities active, reading the emotional resonance of the recorded events. He wasn't bluffing, he whispered. I can feel his determination. He really would have killed everyone. The harvesters' tactical computers couldn't process that kind of decision, Zara explained. Their programming was based on logical self-preservation. They couldn't understand a species that would choose mutual destruction over surrender. She showed the tactical display as the harvester ships actually retreated, withdrawing beyond the system's edge just seconds before the deadline. For the first time since the war began, a harvester fleet had been forced to change their plans, but the station commander didn't actually detonate the reactors, observed Thorne. No, but the harvesters didn't know that, Zara replied. From their perspective, they had encountered a species that was fundamentally unpredictable. Every tactical calculation had to be revised to account for the possibility that humans might choose suicide over defeat. Instructor Vex spoke from his position near the back of the room. This is when the other species began to understand that human warfare was based on completely different principles. What do you mean? Asked a student from the back. Most galactic civilizations developed warfare as an extension of resource management, Vex explained. Conflicts were fought to achieve specific objectives with minimal losses. Victory was defined as accomplishing your goals while preserving your assets, Zara nodded. Humans developed warfare as an extension of survival instinct. We didn't fight to achieve objectives. We fought to ensure that our enemies couldn't threaten us anymore. Ever. She changed the display to show a series of battle statistics. Once word of the Proxima Station incident spread, Earth's military began implementing what they called irrational doctrine across all theaters of operation. The students studied the data with growing amazement. Human forces were winning battles despite being outnumbered and outgunned, but the casualty figures were staggering. You were taking enormous losses, noted Nira with concern. We were taking acceptable losses, Zara corrected. There's a difference. A 90% casualty rate is acceptable if it prevents a 100% casualty rate for your species. She touched another set of markings on her arm. The Battle of New Geneva exemplified this doctrine. The harvesters had taken the planet and were processing the population. Standard military response would have been to write off the planet and establish defenses elsewhere. But you didn't, said Keth, already knowing the answer. We loaded every available ship with volunteers and antimatter charges, Zara replied. Civilian freighters, cargo haulers, even personal yachts. Anyone willing to ram a harvester ship was given a fusion bomb and pointed toward the enemy. The holographic display showed the chaos of the battle. Hundreds of small ships, many piloted by civilians, crashed into harvester vessels in coordinated suicide attacks. The geometric precision of the enemy formation dissolved into chaos as their ships tried to evade the swarm of improvised missiles. It was magnificent and terrible, Zara said quietly. We saved 15 billion people on that planet, but it cost us 8,000 volunteer pilots. The room was completely silent as students struggled to comprehend the scope of sacrifice involved. This is why the war was classified, Dr. Starweaver said from her position near the door. The Galactic Council decided that knowledge of these tactics was too dangerous to share with peaceful species. Too dangerous or too revealing? Asked Thorne pointedly. Zara looked at him with interest. What do you mean? The established galactic powers spent centuries building their reputations on diplomatic solutions and peaceful coexistence, Thorne explained. Admitting that they needed human savagery to survive would have undermined their entire political structure. That's a dangerous accusation. Cadet Thorne, Dr. Starweaver warned. But it's accurate, Zara said softly. The galaxy was saved by embracing the very qualities that civilized species had spent millennia trying to eliminate. Aggression, irrationality, willingness to sacrifice everything for survival. She looked around the room at the faces of her students, seeing understanding beginning to dawn in their eyes. The question you all need to ask yourselves is this: if the harvesters return, are you prepared to become monsters in order to defeat monsters? Because that's what survival might require. 3 weeks into the Applied Conflict Studies seminar, everything changed. Zara was in the middle of explaining human psychological warfare tactics when alarms began echoing throughout the academy. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red, and the station's AI announced a general assembly in the main auditorium. Students filed into the massive space with worried murmurs filling the air. Academy Director Quintus, a distinguished Altarian with silver skin and ancient eyes, stood at the central podium. His usual calm demeanor was replaced by barely concealed tension. Students and faculty, he began, his voice carrying easily through the auditorium's acoustics. I have received classified communications from the Galactic Council. Long-range sensor arrays have detected massive energy signatures approaching from the galactic rim. The murmuring stopped instantly. Zara felt ice form in her stomach as she realized what the director was about to announce. The energy patterns match those recorded during the classified conflicts 15 years ago, Director Quintus continued. The Harvester fleet has returned, and they appear to be significantly larger than before. Panic erupted in the auditorium. Students from dozens of species began talking frantically among themselves, their voices creating a chaos of different languages and emotional expressions. Zara noticed that her seminar students were looking directly at her, their faces reflecting a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Director Quintus raised his hand for silence. The Galactic Council is implementing emergency protocols. All Academy students are to be evacuated to designated safe zones within the next 48 hours. Transport ships are already en route. What about defensive preparations? Called out Instructor Vex from the faculty section. The Council is exploring diplomatic options, the director replied carefully. A collective groan arose from the auditorium. Even the non-military students understood that diplomacy had failed spectacularly during the First War. Zara stood up, her voice cutting through the noise. Director, what's the size and composition of the returning fleet? I don't think that information is appropriate for... Director, Zara interrupted, her command voice emerging despite her civilian status. I'm a classified veteran of the First War. I have clearance to receive tactical briefings. And these students deserve to know what they're facing. Director Quintus hesitated, then activated a holographic display that showed the outer rim of the galaxy. The image was dominated by a massive red cloud representing the approaching Harvester fleet. Initial estimates suggest approximately 50,000 vessels, he said quietly. The First War involved roughly 12,000 Harvester ships. The auditorium fell deadly silent. Even those students who hadn't attended Zara's seminar understood the implications of those numbers. 50,000, whispered Keth, his crystalline form dimming with shock. How is that possible? Zara was studying the tactical display with growing horror. They've been reproducing, learning. The Harvesters we pushed back weren't defeated, they were gathering intelligence about our tactics. She pointed to the formation patterns visible in the sensor data. Look at their fleet composition. It's not the same geometric precision we saw before. They're using irregular formations, multiple approach vectors, unpredictable timing. Instructor Vex's forearms crossed grimly. They learned from our chaos tactics. Which means the strategies that won the First War won't work again, Zara concluded. Counselor Vane, who had opposed the seminar from the beginning, stood up angrily. This is exactly why classified information should remain classified. Now our students are being exposed to military threats that are beyond their ability to comprehend. Actually, said a new voice from the back of the auditorium, I think our students are more capable than you realize. Everyone turned to see Cadet Thorn approaching the central platform, followed by dozens of other students from various species. They moved with purpose and determination that seemed out of place in the panicked atmosphere. Over the past 3 weeks, Thorn continued, students from 17 different species have been attending Commander Chen's seminar. We've learned about warfare, strategy, and what it takes to survive against an implacable enemy. He reached the platform and faced the director directly. We formally request permission to join the defensive preparations instead of being evacuated. Absolutely not, Director Quintus replied immediately. You're students, not soldiers. The Academy's responsibility is to protect you, not send you into battle. With respect, Director, said Jix, his purple skin shimmering with nervous energy. The evacuation protocols are based on the assumption that there are safe zones to evacuate to. But if the Harvesters have learned from the first war, there may not be any safe zones this time. Nira stepped forward, her scaled features set with determination. My species has maintained detailed records of the first war, despite the official classifications. The Harvesters were stopped because unconventional tactics confused their tactical computers. But if they've adapted to chaos, we need something even more unexpected. Zara was watching the student demonstration with growing amazement. What are you proposing? Keth drifted closer to the platform, his crystalline form flickering with excited energy. Multi-species tactical integration. The first war was won primarily by human innovations that other species adopted. But what if we approach the problem differently? Elaborate, said Instructor Vex with interest. Thorn activated his personal datapad and projected a holographic display. Each species in the galaxy has unique capabilities that were never fully integrated during the First War. Zentaurian psychometric abilities, Drakmarian berserker tactics, Voltarian technological adaptation, human chaos doctrine. We've been simulating combined operations, added Jix. The tactical possibilities are exponentially greater when you integrate species-specific capabilities instead of having each species fight independently. Zara stared at the student-created tactical displays with growing excitement. You're talking about true multi-species unit integration. Not just cooperation, but synthesis. The Harvesters have spent 15 years studying human tactics, Nira explained, but they've never encountered integrated capabilities from multiple species working as a unified system. Director Quintus looked around the auditorium, clearly struggling with a decision no Academy administrator should have to make. Even if your tactical theories are sound, you're still students. You lack the experience and training necessary for actual combat. Director, Zara said quietly, these students have spent 3 weeks learning about total war from veterans who lived through it. They understand the stakes and the sacrifices required. Most importantly, they're not burdened by the political considerations that prevented true cooperation during the First War. She gestured toward the assembled students. Look at them. 17 different species working together without regard for traditional rivalries or diplomatic protocols. That's exactly what we need to defeat an enemy that has learned to counter our previous strategies. Instructor Vex moved to stand beside the students. The Academy has always taught theoretical applications of knowledge. Perhaps it's time for practical application. You're talking about turning an educational institution into a military base. Director Quintus protested. We're talking about turning an educational institution into the birthplace of a new kind of warfare, Thorn replied, one that the Harvesters won't be able to predict or counter. Dr. Starweaver approached the platform, her ancient features set with grim determination. The decision isn't really whether to involve the students. The decision is whether to give them proper guidance while they inevitably involve themselves. She looked around the auditorium, at hundreds of young faces filled with fear and determination. These students represent the future leadership of the galaxy. If we evacuate them to supposed safety, we're gambling that someone else will be able to defend them. If we train them properly, we're giving them the tools to defend themselves. Zara felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders once again. The Academy students were looking at her with the same desperate hope she had once seen in the eyes of human colonists facing annihilation. Director, she said formally, I volunteer to coordinate the development of integrated multi-species tactical doctrine. These students have shown more strategic innovation in 3 weeks than the galactic Council managed in 3 years during the First War. The silence stretched on as Director Quintus weighed an impossible decision. Finally, he spoke. Very well. All students who wish to participate in defensive preparations may do so voluntarily. Those who prefer evacuation will be accommodated. Commander Chen, you're hereby authorized to coordinate tactical training with full academy resources. As the auditorium erupted into organized chaos, Zara realized that the Second Harvester War was about to begin very differently than the first. The academy transformed overnight from a peaceful research station into the most innovative military facility in the galaxy. Students who had never held weapons were running tactical simulations alongside veterans. Species that had maintained diplomatic distance for centuries were working together in ways that would have been unthinkable just weeks before. Zara stood in the Academy's largest holographic chamber, watching as mixed-species teams practiced maneuvers that defied every conventional military doctrine she had ever learned. A Zentorian pilot used psychometric abilities to predict enemy movements, while a Drekmarian gunner provided overwhelming firepower, and a human navigator plotted impossible escape routes that relied on chaos theory rather than logical planning. The integration is progressing faster than I expected, reported Instructor Vex as he joined her observation post. The students don't have preconceived notions about how their species should fight. That's exactly what makes them dangerous to the Harvesters, Zara replied. The enemy spent 15 years studying our previous tactics, but they've never seen anything like this. Through the holographic chamber's windows, she could see other teams practicing equally unconventional approaches. Keth was working with a group of engineers to develop crystalline communication networks that could function even under heavy jamming. His species' natural energy manipulation abilities were being combined with Voltarian technology to create communication systems that the Harvesters wouldn't be able to disrupt. Zara, Jix called out as he approached with his usual energetic demeanor. I need to show you something incredible. He led her to a smaller chamber where Nira was working with a mixed team of students around a tactical hologram. We've been analyzing the Harvester approach patterns, Nira explained, her scaled features animated with excitement. The formations look random, but they're not. What do you mean? Zara asked. Jix activated his psychometric abilities and touched the holographic controls. Suddenly, the seemingly chaotic Harvester movements resolved into a complex pattern. They're using mathematical principles derived from chaos theory. They studied our random tactics and created pseudo-random formations that appear chaotic, but are actually completely predictable. The Harvesters have learned to fake chaos, Nira added. Their computers can generate seemingly random behavior patterns, but they're all based on underlying mathematical formulas. Zara stared at the tactical display with growing excitement. Which means we can predict their fake randomness if we can identify the mathematical basis. Exactly, said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Cadet Thorne approaching with a data pad covered in complex equations. My team has been working on pattern recognition algorithms. If the Harvesters are using mathematical chaos instead of true chaos, we can develop counter-algorithms. But that's not the best part, Jix continued, his purple skin practically glowing with excitement. Show her the tactical applications. Nira activated a new holographic simulation. It showed a space battle where Academy forces appeared to be retreating in complete disarray. Harvester ships pursued them in perfectly coordinated formations, following mathematical predictions about human chaos patterns. The Harvesters think they're chasing panicked forces using predictable human tactics, Thorne explained. But watch what happens when our ships reach the designated coordinates. The simulation continued, and suddenly the retreating Academy forces executed a maneuver that was genuinely chaotic. Ships that had appeared to be fleeing in random directions suddenly converged from multiple angles, using gravitational slingshots and debris fields to create attack vectors that no mathematical model could have predicted. True chaos versus mathematical pseudo-chaos, Zara breathed. The Harvesters prepare for fake randomness, and we hit them with genuine unpredictability. It gets better, said Keth as he drifted into the chamber. We've been working on communication protocols that use crystalline resonance patterns. The signals appear to be random energy fluctuations, but they're actually carrying tactical data between our ships. Zara was beginning to understand the scope of what the students had developed. You're creating a new form of warfare that combines genuine chaos with coordinated strategy. The Harvesters won't be able to adapt because they can't distinguish between real chaos and fake chaos. That's the theory, Nira agreed. But we need practical testing before the main fleet arrives. As if summoned by their conversation, Director Quintus entered the chamber with an expression of barely controlled excitement. Commander Chen, I've just received word from the Outer System Patrol. A small Harvester scouting force has entered the system. 3 ships, conducting reconnaissance of our defensive positions. Zara felt her combat instincts surge back to life. How long until they reach scanning range of the Academy? Approximately 6 hours, the director replied. The Galactic Council has ordered all civilian assets to withdraw beyond the system's edge. Actually, said Thorne with a dangerous smile, this sounds like the perfect opportunity for a field test of our new tactics. Absolutely not, Director Quintus replied immediately. These are scout ships, but they're still Harvester vessels. Each one is equivalent to a battlecruiser from any galactic navy, which is exactly why conventional tactics would fail, Jix pointed out. But our new approaches weren't designed to fight conventional enemies. Zara looked around the chamber at the faces of her students. They had spent weeks learning about total war, studying tactics that had saved the galaxy once before. Now they were asking for the chance to prove that their innovations could work against the enemy that had learned to counter human chaos. Director, she said carefully, what's the composition of our available forces? 12 Academy training ships armed with basic defensive systems, he replied reluctantly, plus the Academy's defensive platforms. Against 3 Harvester scouts, Nira mused. In a conventional engagement, we'd need at least 50 ships to have any chance of success. But we're not planning a conventional engagement, Keth observed. Zara made her decision. Director, I formally request permission to conduct a limited engagement against the scout force, using volunteer crews and experimental tactics. Commander, the risk of not testing our theories is greater than the risk of testing them, Zara interrupted. If these tactics don't work, we need to know now, while we still have time to develop alternatives. Director Quintus was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with the implications. Finally, he spoke. Very well. You have permission for a limited engagement, but if the tactical situation deteriorates, you will withdraw immediately. Understood, Zara replied, then turned to address the assembled students. Anyone who volunteers for this mission understands that it's real combat against a genuinely dangerous enemy. This isn't a simulation, and the Harvesters won't hesitate to kill all of us if we make mistakes. To her amazement, every student in the chamber immediately volunteered. 2 hours later, Zara found herself in the command center of an Academy training ship. Surrounded by the most diverse crew that had ever served together, Jix was handling sensor operations, using his psychometric abilities to predict enemy behavior patterns. Keth maintained communication links through his crystalline network. Nira coordinated tactical data while Thorne managed the chaos algorithms that would make their movements genuinely unpredictable. Harvester scouts entering sensor range, Jix reported. 3 vessels, just as intelligence indicated. They're scanning our defensive positions and… Wait. What is it? Zara asked. They're not using the scanning patterns from the first war, Jix replied with growing excitement. They're using adaptive sensors that adjust their frequency and intensity based on what they encounter. They've definitely learned from studying our old tactics. Perfect, Thorne said with grim satisfaction. That means they'll definitely try to predict our chaos patterns using mathematical models. Zara activated the fleet communication system. All ships, this is Academy 1. Initiate Operation Random Walk. Remember, the goal isn't to win a conventional battle. The goal is to test whether our chaos theory can overcome their mathematical predictions. On the tactical display, 12 Academy ships began moving in patterns that appeared completely random. But beneath the apparent chaos, each ship was following carefully calculated routes that would converge at predetermined points, while maintaining the appearance of panic and confusion. Harvester ships are responding, Nira reported. They're adjusting their formations to intercept what they think are our retreat vectors. Zara watched as the enemy ships moved with the geometric precision that had made them so deadly during the First War. But now, instead of being intimidated by their perfect coordination, she saw it as a weakness. They're following mathematical predictions, she observed. Predictions based on studying human chaos patterns from the First War, which means they have no idea what we're actually planning, Jix added with satisfaction. The first test of the Academy's revolutionary new warfare was about to begin. The battle began exactly as the Academy forces had planned. with apparent chaos that masked perfect coordination. The 12 training ships scattered in seemingly random directions as the 3 Harvester scouts advanced with their characteristic geometric precision. To any observer, it looked like a panic retreat by outmatched Academy forces. Harvester vessels are moving to intercept based on predicted flight paths, Nira reported from her tactical station. They're using mathematical models derived from First War human chaos patterns. Zara watched the enemy movements with satisfaction. Just as we hoped. They think they can predict where our ships will go based on algorithmic chaos theory. Their targeting systems are locking onto our projected positions, Jix added, his psychometric abilities allowing him to sense the enemy's intentions. But those positions are based on false mathematical assumptions. On the tactical display, the Harvester ships moved with deadly efficiency toward intercept points that the Academy ships would never actually reach. Meanwhile, the Academy forces were executing maneuvers that appeared random, but were actually coordinated through Keth's crystalline communication network. Phase 2, initiate convergence pattern, Zara commanded. What happened next defied every principle of conventional space warfare. The scattered Academy ships suddenly changed direction simultaneously, using gravitational assists and debris fields to create acceleration vectors that were genuinely unpredictable. Instead of following mathematical chaos patterns, they moved with the true randomness that only organic minds could generate. Direct hit on the lead Harvester scout, Thorne reported with excitement. Their defensive systems weren't positioned to handle genuine chaos vectors. The Harvester ship's perfect geometric formation was disrupted as Academy forces struck from angles that no mathematical model could have predicted. But the real test came in the enemy's response. Harvester ships are attempting to adapt, Nira observed. They're running real-time analysis on our movement patterns. Let them analyze, Zara replied grimly. Keth, initiate the feedback loop. This was the most innovative aspect of the Academy's new tactics. As the Harvester computers attempted to analyze and predict human behavior, Keth's crystalline network fed false data into their sensors. The enemy was essentially analyzing mathematical chaos patterns, while the Academy forces used genuine organic unpredictability. The Harvesters are getting confused, Jix reported with growing excitement. Their tactical computers are receiving conflicting data. Some patterns appear mathematical, others appear genuinely random. They can't determine which analysis model to use. On the tactical display, the enemy formation began to show signs of uncertainty for the first time in recorded Harvester history. The ships were hesitating, their movement patterns becoming less coordinated as their computers struggled to process contradictory information. All ships, execute pattern Omega, Zara commanded. The Academy forces suddenly dropped all pretense of chaos and moved with perfect military precision. The abrupt change from apparent randomness to coordinated assault completely overwhelmed the Harvester tactical computers, which had been programmed to expect either logical military formations or mathematical chaos patterns. The battle was over in minutes. 2 Harvester scouts were destroyed outright, their advanced technology useless against tactics they couldn't comprehend. The 3rd scout attempted to retreat, but Academy forces had positioned themselves to cut off all logical escape routes. The remaining Harvester ship is sending a transmission, Jix reported. It's not a surrender or negotiation attempt. It's a data burst back to the main fleet. Let them send it, Zara replied with satisfaction. In fact, make sure they get all the data they want. Director Quintus's voice came through the communication system from the Academy. Commander Chen, explain your reasoning. The scout ship is transmitting tactical data about our new warfare methods to the main Harvester fleet, Zara explained, which means their tactical computers will spend the next several weeks trying to analyze and counter tactics that are specifically designed to be unanalyzable, Thorne was grinning as he studied the sensor readings. The Harvesters will prepare mathematical counters to mathematical chaos, not realizing that we're actually using organic chaos combined with coordinated strategy. Plus, added Keth, every attempt they make to analyze our tactics will generate false data through our crystalline network interference. The more they study us, the more confused their computers will become. As the Academy fleet returned to base, Zara felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. The students had proven that their innovative tactics could work against Harvester scouts, but the main fleet would present challenges on an entirely different scale. Commander, Nira said quietly as they docked with the Academy, The tactical recordings from this engagement are going to change everything. We've proven that the Harvesters can be defeated using methods they can't counter. More importantly, Jix added, we've proven that multi-species integration creates capabilities that no single species could achieve alone. Over the following days, word of the Academy's victory spread throughout the galaxy, faster than official military communications. The classified tactical recordings somehow found their way to military academies, resistance cells, and defense forces across dozens of star systems. The Galactic Council's response was predictably bureaucratic. They demanded that the Academy cease all military operations and submit to proper oversight. But it was too late. The new tactics were already being adopted by irregular forces throughout the galaxy. The Academy has become the center of a new kind of resistance movement, Dr. Starweaver observed as she and Zara watched news reports from across the galaxy. Military units from dozens of species are requesting training in integrated chaos doctrine. It's not really about the tactics, Zara replied thoughtfully. It's about proving that the established powers don't have a monopoly on effective defense. She gestured toward the Academy's training facilities, where hundreds of volunteers from across the galaxy were learning the principles of multi-species warfare. These students have shown that innovation comes from cooperation, not from political hierarchies. 3 weeks later, long-range sensors detected the main Harvester fleet crossing into the outer galaxy. 50,000 ships arranged in formations that combined mathematical precision with adaptive algorithms designed to counter every known tactical doctrine. But waiting for them was something unprecedented in galactic history, a unified defense force that transcended species boundaries, political affiliations, and conventional military thinking. The Academy had become the training center for a new kind of warfare that the Harvesters couldn't comprehend or counter. Zara stood in the Academy's observation deck, watching as fleet after fleet of mixed-species vessels took up defensive positions throughout the system. Her arms were uncovered now, the markings from the First War visible alongside new tattoos that represented the victories of her students. "Commander," Keth said as he approached with the latest tactical reports, "the Integrated Defense Network is reporting ready status. 47 different species using coordinated chaos doctrine and crystalline communication networks." "Estimated enemy arrival?" Zara asked. 72 hours, Jix replied as he joined them. "But the Harvesters don't know what they're flying into. Their tactical computers are still trying to analyze the false data from our scout engagement." Nira approached from the tactical center, her expression combining determination with the confidence that came from having tested their theories under real combat conditions. "All defensive positions report ready, Commander. The galaxy is about to see what happens when cooperation replaces competition." Zara looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere beyond the visible light, an enemy fleet was approaching that could destroy every world in the galaxy. But for the first time since the war began, she felt genuinely hopeful. "The First War taught us that humans could save the galaxy by embracing our savage nature," she said quietly. "The Second War is going to teach the galaxy that we can save ourselves by embracing our cooperative nature." Thorne's voice came through the communication system from the tactical center. "Commander, we're receiving reports from the Outer Rim. The Harvester fleet has entered our sensor network. They're moving exactly as our mathematical models predicted they would. Then let's show them what happens when mathematical precision meets genuine chaos," Zara replied, activating the Academy's battle stations for what would become known as the most decisive engagement in galactic history. The markings on her skin told the story of the First War, a tale of desperate sacrifice and individual heroism. But the battle about to begin would write a new story, one of cooperation, innovation, and the triumph of united diversity over mechanized conformity. The Academy students who had started as curious scholars were about to become the saviors of galactic civilization, not through superior firepower, but through superior cooperation.